Good morning, and welcome to sunny South Dallas, the home of our new Farah Park Multimedia Center. I'm Deputy City Manager Kimberly Beiser Tolbert. Thank you to our esteemed guests, friends, our great City of Dallas employees, and others joining us today for the city's first Future of Work Forum, in person and virtually. On behalf of our City Manager, T.C. Broadnax, we recognize that people are the city's greatest asset, and investments in human capital should continue to be a top priority. Some may not fully understand what the future of work really means. However, your presence here today demonstrates that you are up to the challenge of reimagining the future of work. The City of Dallas, along with all viable businesses, are faced with the reality of a rapidly changing work landscape. Even prior to the pandemic, the way work is done, the people doing the work, and the workplace was evolving to look and feel very different than what we've ever seen before. Now, it seems that work is changing at an even more rapid speed. Globally, organizations and leaders must adapt to those changes for the near future and beyond. Our Future of Work Forum is the City of Dallas's effort at saying the city is not only concerned about our own employees and economic growth, but we're also ready to collaborate with those around us. At the end of the day, we all recruit from the same areas, and we all want a healthy pipeline of talent and leaders. We look forward to being a resource to share what we are doing and learning about the future of work with not only other municipalities, but all sectors. At this time, I am delighted to introduce Mr. Dean Bishop, who is president of our benefits consulting partner, Holmes Murphy. Dean, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kimberly. Welcome to everyone who is with us online and in the room today. You know, if you look at the title of what we're talking about today, reimagining, change, future, you know, what does that mean? What's driving change? Is the future next week? Is the future next year? Is the future a longer horizon? And the answer to that is yes. It is. When I think about the changes that are coming and what's happening with our clients as we're talking to employers throughout the area about the pressures they're feeling, the opportunities they're pursuing. There was a time when somebody was talking about benefits, what they were giving to their employees to try to help them be part of their company. It was about money. How much is this going to cost? Where can we find savings? That dialogue's really changed. And the dialogue has now really turned to people of that. We're really focusing on the human side of things again. And those are the questions that we're receiving. And I think it's driven by a couple of things. I would call it a couple of P's that are there. One, in our current reality, are prices. And the prices that employees and their families are facing. And in the car ride this morning on the way in, a news report said that rent in the city of Dallas has increased 17.5% in this 1 year. Gas prices, we all know, are up. Housing prices are up. Prices are up. That has employees feeling those things. And it's creating pressure on employers who have prices of labor going up, hourly wages. So prices are causing change. The second piece of this, I think, is our reality now is a pandemic. You probably haven't heard of COVID, but okay, maybe you have. But the pandemic and the change. If you think back to 2+ years ago, a little bit, the word Zoom wasn't a noun. Zoom wasn't a thing. It was a description of how fast something might go, not how you were going to spend your day. We're in a virtual workplace now. Return to work looks different than it does. That's change. How are we as employers responding to that change. The third change and the third P that I see driving this is politics. Politics simply meaning how we deal with people, not Republican or Democrat or progressive or conservative, but the politics of how we deal with people. We're talking about things that maybe were under the surface, but we weren't really willing or able to really get on the table and talk about with our employees, with our leaders in our companies. And I think those things have driven change. On the drive in this morning, looking at directions, it had me enter this beautiful facility from Martin Luther King Boulevard. Dr. King is one of my life heroes. Studied him in college, and it had me thinking this morning about this discussion around change and future. And if you think back to Dr. King's most famous speech, it almost 60 years ago now, 59 years ago, that he has "I Have a Dream" speech, where he talked about his 4 little children and that his dream that they would be viewed and measured by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. If you think about where this change is going, kind of borrow a little bit from Dr. King in that, and how employers are measured and what the future of employment looks like. History would say that that companies are measured by their profits. That's really the value, right? That's the economic value. But what's changing with employees in the future of work, and kind of to borrow a little bit from Dr. King, the question would become whether employers are going to be measured by the passion of their purpose rather than just their profits. And I think that's really what I would like you to think about in terms of the future of work. Not just anxiety of current change and pressures that we're feeling, but what are the opportunities? What can we do in this region? What can we do to lead in a place where work is life-giving, where employees are engaged and driving phenomenal results, great innovations that will continue to make this region a real leader in our country and in the world. So with that, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Jessica Hare. She's a Senior Vice President of Regional Marketing and Talent Attraction for the Dallas Regional Chamber. So what all does that title mean? What that title means is that Jessica sells Dallas and the Dallas region. She is out there trying to convince employers that this is a great place to do business. She has had amazing success in this role of moving big companies like Toyota and lots of mid-sized and small companies, convincing them to pick up their roots where they are and to move to this region, making this one of the most vibrant economies in the world. Jessica, welcome.
Thank you, Dan. All right, so happy to be here today. Thank you, Den, for that wonderful introduction. If you'll bring up my slides, we're going to talk about a couple of different things. First, we're going to start off with a regional overview about the Dallas-Fort Worth region and how things have changed over the years. And then we'll shift gears and talk a little bit about talent attraction and retention and the future that we're all facing today. So on this next slide, a little bit about the Dallas Regional Chamber. Our mission is to focus on economic development, bringing those companies and jobs to town, education and workforce, making sure children have a good education all the way through a career, public policy, of course, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then everything is underpinned by quality of life for all people. Now, on this next slide, I'm going to give you an overview on population, jobs, and economic growth. So let's start off with the unemployment rate. On this next slide, you'll see that our current unemployment rate is 3.4%. That is very low for our region. We've also been growing our employment base throughout the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex by 7.1%, and our consumer spending is up by 18.5%. On this next slide, you'll see how our population has reached the 4th largest metropolitan area with 7.7 million people. You can see that Houston is just behind us, Washington, D.C., as well as Philadelphia. On the next slide, you will see how our population has grown. So in 1974, when the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport established, known at that time as the regional airport, we didn't even have international, really propelled our growth. So you'll see that by 2040, we'll be reaching 10.9 million. So we could pass Chicago and be the second largest, or the third largest metropolitan area. And Texas is at 29.5 million. So on this next slide, you'll see that since 2010, our region has been ranked as a top metropolitan area for population. In the last year, we've grown about 97,000, and that's been on trend for several years, where we're growing about 100,000 extra people every single year. And that's just ahead of Houston and Phoenix. Let's put this into perspective on our region. In the next slide, you'll see U.S. cities with population similar to DFW cities. So if you compared, say, San Diego to the size of Dallas, it's pretty comparable. We also have Charlotte right here next to us with Fort Worth, and New Orleans, nestled in between, is about the size of Arlington. Can you imagine having all of these cities in one single place that had to work together? Well, that's what we do here in the Dallas-Fort Worth region. We're very large, and we're similar to small and large cities across the entire United States. On this next slide, let's talk about that 3-year job growth in the 12 largest U.S. metros. So if you think about it, that's 1 year pre-pandemic and then 2 years in the pandemic. You'll see that our job change has been 283,000, and we exceed the combined net job gains of the next 4 largest U.S. metropolitan areas, which are all those that are listed in that lighter blue. So definitely growing strong despite being in a global pandemic. So let's talk about the sectors that are growing. On this next slide, you'll see over that same 3-year period that almost every single sector is growing right now. Our top 3 are trade, transportation, and utilities. Remember that consumer price index spending earlier? Well, that's part of it. We're a great logistics hub with lots of products and services coming through our region, so 97,000. Followed by professional and business services. We have a huge corporate base, and all of those services are supported by those 97,000 employees. And then followed by financial activities, and so on from there. On this next slide, you'll see a percentage return to pre-pandemic jobs. We're back, everybody, with 104.7% of the jobs that we had pre-pandemic. When you look at the 12 largest metros, we're still leading the pack, followed by Atlanta and Phoenix. Let's look at the future. This event is about focusing on the future. So as you look at the 5-year economic indicators on this next slide, you'll see that our population will increase by 615,000. We're expected to be very strong increase in jobs as well at 439,000. And then our regional output is a very large number, as well as retail sales. So we're expected to be a very, very strong region over the next 5 years. And this is going to impact everything related to talent and people, with everyone moving into our region. On this next slide, I want to show you a visual that really shows how our employment by Texas regions is back. So you'll see here a huge dip in the pandemic, and then a huge swing back, almost very much higher than where we were pre-pandemic. So you'll see that 104.7 compared to that March 2020. Very strong for the Dallas and Fort Worth metropolitan divisions. On the next slide shows our unemployment rate. So you'll see that we reached a peak of 14.7 in April of 2020, and now our unemployment rate is leveling off at 3.4%. That's very low for our region, which means there is a struggle to get the talent that our employers need. So let's look at the unemployment on the next slide by industries. So what you'll see here is large unemployment. The red line represents 2021, and the blue line represents unemployment in 2022 by sector. So, of course, that first one is mining and gas, leisure and hospitality, large unemployment rates as we were going through the recession, or excuse me, the pandemic, but we're going back down to those much lower levels. And then on the right side of the slide is information professional services. So across the board, unemployment across all sectors is much, much lower compared to those pre-pandemic rates. This impacts salaries. So let's look at the next slide. The cost of recruiting is climbing. This is a snapshot from the Dallas Morning News article earlier this year. And the recommended salaries to recruit candidates in all of these job clusters in Dallas-Fort Worth is increasing. And so you can see from operations, administrative services, to finance, to technology and legal services, it's across the board compared to what that median pay was in 2021. So we're growing, we've got a lot of great jobs, but our costs are also increasing. So what does this mean for our employers? And our panel is going to dig into a lot of that. But let me give you a snapshot about everything that we're hearing at the Dallas Regional Chamber. So on this next slide, I'm going to share with you some talent attraction trends and then some of those tangible resources that you can use today. So on this next slide, we've really summed it up into 5 trends to meet where your employees and recruits are today, because we've got to adapt. So the very first one is money isn't everything, but flexibility is. So on this next slide, I love this picture because it really depicts what every employer needs to do today to meet their recruits and candidates and current employees where they are today. Now, while you may be with an organization or a company that doesn't have the ability to be agile and move things quickly, this is our current reality. Our talent today across the United States is asking for more flexibility and changes. And as we've gone through these continued waves of COVID, as Den mentioned, these changes are here to stay. How many of you were told, if you were working in an office, go home for a couple of weeks and we'll figure that out? Well, here we are 2 years plus later, and we're on the other side of this. And so much of the talent landscape has changed. So on this next slide, let me share with you some of the survey work from the Dallas Regional Chamber members. We did a Snap Pulse survey April 14th through 25th, 2022. We have 700 members, and you can see the response by survey size, largest to smallest there, and then the survey by industry. So what you see is it's a nice cross-section between industry and size of company. So we asked on this next slide, what workplace flexibilities are you currently offering your employees? So and this was a check all that apply. So you'll see here the first one, 55% remote work on specific days and or times is something employers are offering, as well as flexible working hours within a workday or a work week. So that might mean, hey, I've got kids to take in the morning. Can I come in a little bit later and I'll work till 6 to make sure that we're getting the job done? Or it could mean flexibility within the week. I've got a baseball game this day. Can I work longer this day? Or something along those lines. And then that third one, 38% of employers who responded to the survey determine where and when they work. Let's just pause right there. Can you imagine if I said that in 2019? 38% of employers determine where and when they work. That's a change. Moving on down, 14%, some positions have work remote options, as well as part-time on the 10%, part-time with full-time benefits, and then shorten work week by compressing longer days into 4. And then we did not have anyone, respond with job sharing. So flexibility is key. On the next slide, the second trend is flexible office hours. So after working remote in an office environment, talent returned back to us and said, hey, we kind of want to keep this. So 62% of employers who responded to this survey are working in a hybrid arrangement. And again, that's from our survey in April, 62%. Well, what does hybrid mean? Hybrid, flexible, they can mean different things. So those who responded to the survey, 35% are operating in a 2 to 3 days a week required in the office where all or most of their employees. So that's a big chunk. And then moving down 17%, it's decided by the department and or the team. Then that 10%, employees determine when they work in the workplace. So they're opting in, maybe they come in for a couple hours on Tuesday and it's a few times a month. 31%, all or majority, are in Monday through Friday. And when you dive into the industry segments, a lot of those are essential working companies where their employees are required to be on site. And then the 7% other arrangements were where they had individual employees that had remote work opportunities. So the third reason, we've talked about flexibility and that's what talent wants, but hey, incentives don't hurt either. Whatever those benefits are, incentives are definitely still a driver for talent today. In fact, 50% of small business owners said that they raised their pay in the last 3 months, and that's a 48-year high. 50% raised their salary. So the cost of labor is increasing, which also means the cost to attract talent is increasing. On this next slide, I've got a few tips here. The annual raise tied to cost of living is dead. That may be counterintuitive as you think about those costs increasing in our area and across the United States, but what it means is that pay adjustments are being revisited multiple times a year, and that could come in several different forms. It could come in the form of a retention bonus or a wellness bonus, and they might be parsed out, but it also could be an adjustment on that base salary. We're also seeing supplemental retention and wellness bonuses, higher 401k matching. I talked to a company that said they increased significantly their matching of 401k during the COVID pandemic. And then they're also adding benefits like childcare. And hey, if you don't have kids, how about a meal delivery? This is the world we're in today, which seems like it would be ridiculous in pre-COVID times. So the fourth trend that we're seeing is you've got to get social for diversity. You can't just sit in your remote office. So attend those conferences and events for underrepresented talent. Join and engage in social media professional networks, and then use our resources on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so just pause a minute on social media. I don't mean just posting on LinkedIn. Facebook, for example, has so many groups and individual underrepresented areas that you can use to really use your personal network to share that you have open positions and jobs, because you might be able to tap into an audience that you haven't in the past. On this next slide, number 5, leadership is almost everything. So we've talked about the 4 other reasons, but let's pause on leadership. Management matters. How many of you heard people don't leave their organizations, they leave their managers? That's true, but it's not necessarily the whole truth. So management matters, but leadership matters more. So make sure that your leaders understand the interests of workers. You're going to hear so much great information today from what I've shared and what the panel is about to share. Share that with your leaders so that they have a pulse on what talent and the workers today are wanting. Work toward balancing those organizational policies with employee interests. I think of it like a pendulum. You don't want to swing too far one way or the other, but you've got to listen to both sides. The last is explore, see what works, experiment. Those who wait and see what others are doing could be left behind. So definitely work with your leaders through this effort. Now in closing, I'm going to run through some resources that can help you today around attracting and retaining talent. First, Say Yes to Dallas. It's a national communications and marketing campaign showcasing all the reasons why the Dallas area is the best place to launch a career, continue a career, raise a family, and have a great quality of life. Our campaign highlights all of the open positions, talks about our great economy, Where do you live? What lifestyle can you have? What do you do when you're not at work? Are you parks and outdoors person, or are you more culture and entertainment? So this campaign has a robust website, a social media platform. We're on all social media, a magazine that comes out annually, a monthly newsletter that you can subscribe to, events and workshops where you'll hear much of what you heard about today. We have a toolkit and an essentials guide for your candidates. On this next slide, I'm going to dive into what our toolkit offers. Have you ever been asked by a candidate who's not from here, or maybe grew up here, left, and now they're considering coming back? Well, we've got all those in our key messages in our toolkit that you can access on our website at sayyestodallas.com. There's also campaign materials. You can have our logos and our slide decks and all of the great imagery of our region. We also have a diversity and tech hiring toolkit with a lot of best practices and resources that you can use to attract tech talent from diverse audiences. And then there's a global toolkit. As you're recruiting candidates internationally, how do you talk about our region for someone who's never been to America? So lots of key messages there as well. On this next slide, you'll see that we also have a candidate essentials guide where we cover the DFW region and a map. It can be hard to navigate if you've never been to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We also have a cost of living calculator. While our costs are increasing, there's still several places where costs are very much higher than where we are today. There's a moving checklist. There's 30 things you need to do in your first 30 days. And so if you haven't done some of these things, like changing your driver's license and getting those new license plates, check out our first 30 days and we'll guide you through it. Lots of testimonials and hidden gems and entertainment guides. On this next slide, I'm going to dive a little bit into our diversity and tech hiring toolkit. And there's a QR code where you can scan the screen to access it right now. It has resources to promote equitable sourcing, but there's also best-in-class companies with tech training and underrepresented groups. So you can see how employers across our region are doing a good job here. And then where to find that diverse talent for specific needs. So great resource to tap into today. And then childcare. It's really hard to get to work if I have a little one that needs to have care. So let's go into the next slide. If you're an employer that is offering benefits around childcare, then you potentially could be a best place for working parents. This is a program of the Dallas Regional Chamber and PNC Bank. It recognizes those family-friendly employers, and with a short 3-minute assessment, you can get this badge to use in your talent attraction and marketing programs. And so on this next slide, it runs through the different policies that make a best place for working parents, and we have over 109 Dallas Regional Chamber members who have received this badge. So feel free to scan this QR code and take this 3-minute self-assessment and see if you qualify for this badge as well. That concludes my remarks. Thank you very much for having me today, and I am going to kick it back over to Den. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Great information, very valuable and valuable resources. Hopefully everyone will access those QR codes and get some of the great things that the Dallas Regional Chamber provides for employers and for people moving to the community. So I want to do a quick introduction of our panel, and there's a QR code on your screen that you can access to get full bios of the group that is seated next to me here. But I'll give you just a quick sense of who's there before we do this. So not long bios, but Jason Cooley from the city of Frisco. He's Chief Innovation Officer, so you kind of think of what he is bringing to the panel. Next to him, Nina Arias. Nina is with the city of Dallas, and she is responsible for the compensation and benefit programs. So all of these items that touch people and make them want to stay, that is under Nina's area. Jim Ellis is with Healthcare Service Corporation. You would know that as Blue Cross Blue Shield. And Jim is responsible for organizational effectiveness, so he hits some of the HR and people-related items there. Next is Valerie Freeman, and I can't put in one box what all Valerie does. She's the CEO of 3 companies, and she's the only person I have met who is in 3 different business Hall of Fames. So Valerie will have an entrepreneur spirit really in businesses around workforce support. In terms of what she brings. Troy Duke is also on the panel. Troy is with Stream Realty, responsible for all things HR. I love, in his bio, he was an ambassador of culture. That's a big title. So Troy will bring that to today's panel. And then last but not least, Carrie Jo Zika with Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. She is responsible for all things HR and supporting there at the airport. I was at the airport last night, so great people there taking care and getting me home safely. To introduce our facilitator is Allie Payne. Allie is the president of Ethos. And Ethos, you kind of thinking, what is that company? Ethos is a relatively new entrepreneurial company that Allie started, and it is really designed to help employers create more of a life-giving experience for their employees. My words, not Allie's, in terms of what that really is. But Allie is passionate about helping people figure out to bring their whole self to work, to engage with their employer, helping employers figure out how to truly connect with their employees so that their companies can thrive and their people can thrive in a healthy, vibrant culture. So with that, I will bring up Allie, who will facilitate the panel. We'll do a quick switch of this podium, and Allie will take it from here. Allie?
All right. Well, welcome, everyone. We're excited about this panel today. We have a lot of great things going on. I loved the talk earlier about all things Dallas-Fort Worth. I think it's an exciting time to be here, and I'm excited to be here as well. So welcome, everyone. Good to have you.
Thank you.
We're ready to go this morning. I think one of the things that Den talked about is really this purpose-driven organization, and I cannot tell you there are more and more organizations that are trying to figure out what is my purpose coming out of the pandemic, because my employees want to know that they work for an organization that is doing something greater than what we think that they should be doing, which is their everyday job. They want to know that they work for an organization that's really doing more than just the everyday. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I believe in a future-ready world, a future-ready organization. We've got to think differently and be willing to change, and change is really hard. So Carrie, I would love to hear from you on what your idea of future-ready really means in this new normal, new world, I don't know.
Sure. Thank you, Allie. At DFW International Airport, which my responsibility is truly for about 2,000 employees. It's like a city, like the city of Dallas. Most of you think of DFW International Airport and you think of 60,000 employees that we have on site. But we also, as we think about the future of work, have to think about those other 60,000 as well as the millions of people that travel through DFW Airport. And so our challenge is large when it comes to how do you bring employees on and keep them in order to help them serve our community, which is our passenger and customer traffic. So future of work for us is truly what you said, Allie. It's about change and bringing people on that embrace change and are ready for transformation. Our strategic plan, which we just rolled out to all 2,000 employees over the last couple of months, is 100% digitization and innovation is our number one focus. So that's how we're working toward that.
Awesome. Jim, talk a little bit about Future Ready at your organization.
Yeah, it's interesting, Allie. I think of the term future ready, and you asked the question, are you ever really ready? Because we were talking with some of the panelists today, and literally the environment around us is changing daily. As I was in the airport coming down here on Tuesday, I noticed in the United Kingdom, one of the largest pilots that they announced it on Monday, with moving to a 4-day work week. And so I'm sure we'll see a lot of information around that. It's multi-sector, it's financial services, it's education, large and small companies. So it'll be interesting to see as they study this, the effects on employee morale, employee wellness, climate, interestingly, as people aren't commuting to the workplace as much. So a broad study, but here this just drops on Monday, right? And so we as employers are always attempting to be ready, but I think it really gets down to research and understanding what's happening, but then pulling it back in to say what really fits with our culture, what really fits with the purpose. You mentioned purpose earlier, and what are some things that we can try out and pilot and see what works as well.
Interestingly enough about that study, it isn't just cramming the full 40-hour work week into those 4 days. It's literally working 80% of the time and having 20% of your time to focus really on your family and your friends, which I thought was very interesting. So I'm excited about that study. I can't wait to see more about it. I know there's a lot of organizations across the country that are attempting this 4-day work week. So we're excited to learn more about that. So good call on sharing that information, Jim. Jason, how about you in the public sector with the city of Frisco? How are you thinking about future-ready work?
Sure. So we haven't gotten to the point where we're thinking about a 4-day work week, but we would like to. But really and truly, over the pandemic, what we realized is, like many cities, we didn't stop working. We changed the way we worked. So we were always there, but we may not have been in office. And so one of the big things that we're looking at now is how can we continue to provide those services, but in a different way. So whether we are doing a work from home situation or 20/40 or 60/40 type of situation, what are we doing? How do we leverage technology, emerging technology, to make sure that we can continue to provide that high level of service? It might just be a different way. And part of the issue is the communication process as well, is making sure that you may not see the same people in the office, but you're understanding that the services are still being delivered. So we need to communicate that not only to our citizens, our business leaders, our partners, but also the employees as well, what our expectations are. So right now we're in the process of trying to define those expectations, looking at how we work, and as we start recruiting, we have to communicate that as well, is that these are our expectations, but yet we can change how we do things, right? Change is the part, is a big piece.
I love that you brought up communication. I think as we continue to think about, how do we help our employees understand what we're trying to do, communication seems to always come up. We can never be good enough at communication for our employees or our citizens, in your case, Nina and Jason. But I do think, one of the things that we're really trying to focus on with a lot of organizations is really around how do we help our leaders get ready to be future ready. So Valerie, as a leader, three times over, right? What are you doing to get your leaders ready, or what are you doing to get ready to be future ready?
Oh my gosh, well, I thought we were future ready until the pandemic hit, and then we became future ready on steroids. I mean, it was crazy. We always felt like we were on the front of technological innovation, because we have to find the talent for all of these new technologies that are coming out, and they're coming out faster and faster and faster. So we do a lot of training. We go to a lot of conferences. We participate in a lot of technology organizations, and we just have to keep learning. And so, and also within our employee base, we're team-oriented, very team-oriented. We can't do anything on our own. It's all part of a team. And so that's really has been a focus of training our leaders to talk to their employees about how important teamwork is, and how you really can't be a one-off person. You have to be able to work in a team. So I think that's part of being a leader, is participating in a lot of organizations, conferences and things, learning about what's going on. And I learn from other leaders. So I like to spend a lot of time not only with other leaders of organizations, which I am in some of my CEO groups, but also I participate in a lot of organizations where I talk to workers. And I learn a lot from the workers. And of course also from interviewing. So we do a lot of interviewing. I don't do so much anymore, but I have in the past, and you learn so much about what employees like, don't like, why they want to leave, why they want to stay, and so future ready for us is we have to know about all the technologies. We have to understand them. We have to understand the terminology. And on the candidate side, we have to know what they want and what they're willing to do. And now it's all over the place. It's not as easy as it used to be, where you just, what company do you want to go to work for? Okay, here you go. Here's an interview. And now it's like, do you want to work from home? Do you want to work 2 days a week? Do you? I mean, it's endless. So that's what Future Ready means for our organization.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I think one of the other things when you talk about, what do our younger talent want? We know that by 2025, 75% of the workforce will be millennials or younger. And with that comes lots of different things that we all have to think about. One of them being technology, and what are we doing in that technology space? So Nina, will you share with us what the City of Dallas is doing around technology and Future Ready?
Absolutely. Ali, the challenge is that when we're talking about the future of work, technology is one piece. It's not only about how work is done or the tools that we use, but in addition to that, it's about the type of workers that we invite to be part of our organization. It's no longer the full-time worker alone that is going to do the job. And part of that flexibility also is about exploring what are the needs of employees and in terms of flexibility, but also with the number of hours worked, as in temp employees and or employees that may work on occasion, as they have the flexibility to do. So in terms of technology, it's extremely important that we have the tools to be able to engage employees wherever they are. And at the City of Dallas, during the pandemic and throughout these 2 years and beyond, there have been a significant investment to make our technology such that enables employees to work from everywhere. Now, that is for employees that have jobs for which you can do that. However, we have a number of essential employees that do not have the opportunity to work remotely in that way. But we have, at the city, we have about 50 departments. Every department represents a different industry. So when we're looking at future, we're trying to imagine what that industry is going to look like in 10 years and what kind of technology do we need to be able to prepare for that. And not only in terms of technology, but how do we train our employees to be ready to use that technology? How do we upskill our current workforce so that they have works in the future? So the issue is not only about technology, it's about who does the work, where do they do that work, and also how do they do it, and what that work is going to look like, because it may look very different. And if we're not thinking about that, it's going to be here sooner than we think. So even helping our managers, our leaders, understand that it is now that we start thinking about it, planning about it, understanding what that looks like, in understanding where we're now, and then bridging that gap.
I always think about when you think about the cell phone, what happened in the cell phone in 1989, that was the first year that really the commercial cell phone hit the market. And you think about 30 years later, the changes that have happened just with the cell phone alone. And you think about all the other technology pieces that are intersecting with us that, some of us didn't even know what Zoom was on March 17th, 2019 or 2020? I don't even know what year it was anymore. You think about, we all had to figure that out almost the next day. And we thought, it'll be 2 weeks and we'll be good, right? No, we're still in Zoom world, and I'm still trying to figure out how I get time to go to the bathroom and things like that. So you're just on Zoom call after Zoom call after Zoom call, right? So I think, one of the things when we're really thinking about how do we think about the future and how do we get ready for the future, culture is such an important element of all of those pieces. And 35% of Texans have left the workforce or plan to leave the workforce. Troy, you're our culture guru on the panel today. I need to know, tell me more about what we're doing and what we're doing inside our culture and with benefits and strategies to attract and retain talent. What are you doing to do that?
I think that we're survivors. Any of us who've come through the pandemic realize we have learned in a generation that we were never expecting to be in. And so we have to embrace the technology, the people, the culture, the benefits. All of those resources come together and they make us a stronger workforce. And so I think that turning away from the change can only be a detriment to our growth. And so I think we've always pushed, well, communication is just email. And well, our generation is not looking at email. So we have to be digitally minded. We have to look at social media. We have to transform our platforms. So looking at, for Stream, looking at our culture is who we are. We're smart, we're honest, we're nice, we're passionate. We establish that branding, and so our goal is to live that out in every aspect of what we do. And so we have to look at our healthcare platform. What is important? Right now we're evaluating new trends where I've had conversations with employees who have said, Troy, childcare, fertility benefits, aspects that, we had always said, well, there's a cost factor associated with that. I don't think you can look at just the cost as one aspect. So we have to expand our benefits, our willingness to understand the mental component, especially as I mentioned, we're survivors. We adopted a program called Care Partners. It's a digital app that we created. It is a 100% paid for service by Stream, where employees literally, when they're going through mental health issues, counseling, grief, stress, they literally can connect with an app and within 5 minutes can speak with a counselor who can walk them through and provide them resources. We also said your family is a part of the hiring experience and a part of our firm, so we need to make that available to each and every one of you. So it's doing the little things. I will tell you that the president of our organization, Chris Jackson, my wife opens the mail and there's a letter from him. And he wrote a handwritten letter to her to thank her for allowing me to be a part of the firm and for my contributions and acknowledging it. So I think involving the family in what we do is something that's changing our culture, that's building retention. It's the little things that matter. So we've really looked at our expansion of benefits, our work schedules, how we communicate our technology to maintain that culture, to maintain that integrity, because that's going to have the long-term benefit of who we are. So.
That's great. One of the things that we continue to talk to organizations about is experience. So not only experience for your customers, but also what's the experience inside your organization for the employees. And I can't help but think about my experience every time I get to fly to Dallas. So Carrie, when I think about the experience that I get with all of the employees at DFW, which I know many employees at DFW are behind the scenes, they're making it happen, right? But how do you at DFW think about the employee experience, and how will you have to help that experience shift and transition over the next few years and beyond?
Sure. One of the things that we're really focusing on, and have even pre-pandemic, but now it's, of course, putting more efforts into it, are our employee resource groups. We've continued to expand them. I know a lot of companies have them, but when I came to DFW Airport 3.5 years ago, I came from an organization that didn't have such thing, and I was like, wow, this is really great. And that is truly one of the things our recruiters talk to every employee about, how you can be involved on day one. Pre-pandemic, you had to work in the organization for a year before you could be part of an employee resource group. And just like I talked about with the change and the evolve, you have to meet your new employees at the door and get them engaged immediately. There's no wait time anymore. There's no wait until you get through probation. You get them through probation and you elevate them immediately. So I think our employee experience really is elevated by all of our employee resource groups. We cover military veterans, and in addition, we added allies this year. So it's not just you have to be part of that group and identify with it, but we also invite allies to our groups this year as well, which has really expanded that. And there's not an employee on a weekly basis that doesn't talk about how much they enjoy that part of the job, because it's part of the job. It's not just a fun thing. It's not parties and planning events. It's truly who DFW is in the fabric.
Nina, I know one of the questions we got earlier in the week was really around how the city is thinking about attracting and retaining talent. So what are the things that you're doing at the city that might be different than what you did before pandemic versus now?
Yes, obviously, we all know the pandemic changed everything. Many of the strategies that were mentioned, we are using, like utilizing more social media, making sure that employees go through the process, understanding what the job really is. We have a great advantage is that at the City of Dallas, what we do matters. what we do is actually something that people want to be part of. So we are using that more and more, highlighting the importance of working for an employer that makes a difference. So we are utilizing actually what the city is, who the city is, to attract and retain employees, and also looking at working with every department so that there is a career ladder that is very visible to people that are coming in. Because people are looking at the city of Dallas as a place to develop, a place to grow. Some people may think about the city as a stepping stone in their career, a place to acquire experience, which is fine. Because we believe that we actually develop talent that then goes into the region and acquires talent and acquires more experience, sometimes comes back to us as alumni and do great things at the city. But many times people come in thinking that it's going to be, or there's no clarity about, okay, how do I move up? So we are working with, again, every department, because about retention is a big part of what a leader does. So the work that we do is leader-led, HR-enabled. So we provide the tools, we provide the resources, but we empower the leaders. So it is them that is working with employees to show them what comes next, so that when we are recruiting, we're not just talking about the job at hand, but we're also talking about future opportunities.
Jason, if you were going to help Nina from a technology standpoint, how would you help her?
Well, one of the things that's actually happening in Frisco now, we're renovating our city hall. It's 160,000 square feet. And so as we do this renovation, we're really talking to our employees. We're listening to what they say. Like as you mentioned before the pandemic, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, they really weren't part of our organizational pieces. Now every call is a Teams call. And so how can we make using this technology more user-friendly, if you will, for our employees, but at the same time looking at those millennials that we talked about earlier. That's the expectation coming in. We can't build up to that. We already have to, if we want to attract those individuals, the high skill sets with technology, we have to be able to integrate that technology into our business culture now. And so that's what we're working on now, is making sure that listening to employees, first of all, and trying things. We can't be afraid to test things, pilot things, fail quickly and learn from that experience and move on. That's what we're doing now. And so we'll be willing to try something, and if it works, we'll keep it and we'll make it part of our organization. If it doesn't, then we'll move on quickly and try something new. So it's an opportunity for evolution in what we do.
Yeah. I love it. You're innovating every day, right? I think we have to all be thinking about how can we innovate every day and be willing to try something and know that it might fail, right? I think that's another thing that we learned during the pandemic is we can fail and we can shift on a second almost. So I love it. Thank you for sharing that. Jim, you talked a little bit about flexibility earlier and shared the recent study that's coming out. Talk a little bit about work flexibility at your organization.
Sure. So, like every organization, we're facing, this dynamic of what we know is with a pandemic and, these troves of workers that have experienced 2 years plus of remote work. The longer that people are in the remote work, they don't want to come back. They get, in their routine and that's hard to break. We have a pretty diverse workforce as far as job type as well, so that we've got folks on the front line who do need to be in the office, and so but we also have an important component of our organization is our commitment to our communities, to the city of Dallas, to the city of Chicago, the municipalities in which we operate, and so we have an obligation to be there as well. So that draws a lot of us and up to our CEO. It's very important for us to make sure that we're taking care of the communities in which we operate in. So we've had a pretty forward and aggressive manner in bringing employees back. Of course, we've had turnover and other issues that a lot of organizations are facing where employees don't want to come back in, but we were upfront and very careful, of course, with the pandemic as far as how we brought people back. So we recognize the need. We do have the opportunity for, we converted all of our employees to flex that aren't full-time telecommuter. We increased our telecommuter footprint slightly. But we do have a flexible policy where there's 3 days of in the office work and then 2 days that employees can use at their discretion as well.
I shared earlier that 35% of Texans are either planning to quit or have quit their roles over the course of the next few months. And the primary reason they shared with their employer why they were leaving was really around childcare. And we heard earlier that childcare is a big deal, and you can even get a certificate to be a childcare star, I would say. You know, what are things that you're doing in your organizations that are helping with childcare issues? And is it flexibility? Is it providing on-site care? Like, what are you doing? And Valerie, I'll go to you first. Are there specific things that you're doing to help with that, you know, that working parent to try and keep them in the workforce, or share with us?
Well, one of the things that we're doing is letting people work from home. If they have children, it depends on how young they are. If they're young at home, if they're babies, or if they're in school. So we've been very flexible about, you need to go pick up your child in the middle of the day, you need to take them to the doctor, we don't care. It's when you're working from home, you're probably working more hours than you need to work anyway. So that's one of the things that we're doing. It's really harder. You know, we have this whole group of employees that are contractors, and it's way harder to try to figure out how to help them because some of them are working from home, some of them are not, and trying to keep up with all that. That's why we need artificial intelligence to help us with that. But that's really the main thing that we're doing. We haven't yet subsidized child care, but we're certainly looking at all of those options because it is a problem.
Carrie, what about you? I can just imagine that flexibility at DFW would be a little harder than at another organization. So share what you're doing, at least flexibility, and then also tackle the child care question.
We are rolling out our policy here in June, and it's called Lead with Flexibility. And so we are not identifying a hybrid schedule. We came off of a 3-2. And just remember also that 60% of our employees are not able to be, you know, a remote worker. We have police, we have fire, we have airfield operations, things of that nature. And so it's a really delicate balance from an HR standpoint of, you know, is it the haves and the have-nots? Are you creating a divide for individuals? And we just, you know, we have electricians on, you know, staff. So what we do and what we're pushing forward with our leaders is to just lead with flexibility. Absolutely, if somebody has a child care issue, let them work a flexible schedule. Let them work remotely if it works for their job. Be a leader and make those decisions at that level instead of at the organizational level. And we're still working through how that's working. You know, just we're only in the second week of June and we just started it last week. So that's what we're doing. On the child care side, we have received that designation the last 2 years, so we're proud of that. Thank you. We don't have daycare on site. That's a little bit different on, you know, federal grounds, and we think back to the Oklahoma bombing, et cetera. We can't do those things, but we are looking at that and how can we subsidize, or what partnerships are out there. We have an employee discount page, for example, and we do have some daycares where we've put their information on that page and said we have a discount as a DFW employee, which could also extend to our concessionaires as well. So those are the kinds of things we're looking at. Again, future, you've got to try to stay ahead of it. It's very difficult, but those are some of our things.
Great. Nina, how about at the city? What are you doing around childcare?
Yes, actually, we recently implemented a childcare subsidy for a lower level earners. So employees that earn less than $66,000 have access to this subsidy. In addition to that, we just implemented paid parental leave, which has been really fantastic for many of our employees. They have, you know, I hear very often the appreciation, especially from fathers that have the opportunity to stay during that time with their newborns. And in addition to that, the flexibility, we are really encouraging each one of our departments to look, and we're working on this next year. We're going to be developing a specific future of work plan for each department. So every department is going to look at what that future will look like and how many of those employees can have either hybrid and or just beyond hybrid, just a look at the work that is done and reimagine how that work can be done in a different way so that we can give people more flexibility. And that deals with our first responders, and we too. I mean, we have 13,000 employees, and within them, just a great diversity of skills and just needs. So understanding what the needs are, we're about to roll out a survey, understanding those that did not use the subsidy because it was a new benefit. Why didn't they? How can we meet them where they are so that we are not assuming that we are developing a program that meets their needs, but we truly understand the need and then develop a program around that.
Sounds like you need some AI. The survey is a great way to get it, but wouldn't it be great if someone could just tell you what it was? Troy, are you seeing AI make an impact in the work that you're doing with employees or even with your customers or clients?
And kind of, you know, I think a lot of the challenges we're all experiencing is the workforce shortage, finding qualified talent. So as we look at, you know, what resources are available of how we can continue to be more productive, those are the aspects that we're focusing on. So really expanding our technology reach. But I think we also, you know, can't underestimate the value of people. So with technology expanding, I think we've really focused still on the people aspect of the integrity of our culture and helping embrace and connect the people with the AI options that are available, because it has exploded over the many resources of the contacts I'm having on an everyday basis of different level of services, from expanding, you know, our dependent care benefits, that how we can be more nimble and give our employees more resources. There's options for technology there to other sources. So we've really focused on, you know, embracing it and not being afraid of it. And I think that's a key thing.
Key thing. I think sometimes I'm afraid of AI. So Jason, you have to know a lot about AI, and in your role, you're probably either thinking about how you use it or how you don't use it. Talk a little bit about how you're using AI at Frisco.
So the first thing is I like to take a step back and say from AI to go back to data. And I think that's where we really start with the whole process, is that we're collecting data, whether it be traditional methods like with surveys and with things that we capture in Microsoft Excel or databases. We have data. And now the key is, how do we use that data to make some type of action, predictable action to change some type of behavior, right? That's what we're trying to do. That's what we want to get to with AI. The first thing we have to make sure is that our data is accurate and that we're giving out clean data. And so that's the first piece, and that's the biggest challenge for so many, because I think that's where we start to have the hesitancy and we get a little afraid that we're making good decisions based upon data. And so making sure that we have clean data and accurate data is the biggest piece, and so that's our first step. Once we do that, we can start exploring more. Well, how can we deploy it in the field? We've been looking at things in public works, in our HR, parks and recreation. We've been using different little pilots to try to see if it works, and as it works, like we said before, as it works, we continue to progress. If it doesn't, it's something that we'll stop. But the open data process is one that we're really focusing on and trying to make sure that we can be as tight as possible in that process. Yeah.
Jim, are you using AI in your role?
We are. Across the company, of course, we're using it heavily in our claims area, our IT areas, our digital. We think of our company, even though we're in a certain sector in the health insurance area, we have to take the view of what our customers want, right? So it should be, even though it's a complex transaction for someone to understand all the coverages and benefits of healthcare, we aspire to be as easy to do business with, if you will, as buying a pair of shoes online. And I think that's the bar that our customers set for us. So certainly we're using those across those areas. And Jason and I talked earlier about data, but Nina and I talked a little bit about how our jobs have changed. But certainly the use of Tableau dashboards, looking at, since I'm in an HR role, looking at flight risk models, really starting to pull data together to be predictive about where we think we might have trouble spots in our workforce and where we have to lean in a little more.
So when you think about the demographics inside your workforce, there are 5 generations in the workforce, everything from traditionalist to your Gen Z, right, and everything in between. We know that by 2025, 75% of millennials will be or younger. So 75% of the workforce will be millennials or younger. Interestingly enough, the oldest millennial is not that young anymore. We keep thinking that millennials are young and inexperienced, but your oldest millennial's 41, so there might be your CEOs and your CFOs, you never know, might be leading your company. So they're not inexperienced, they're very inexperienced. How are you using the demographics in your organizations to help you think about that future ready?
We're focused on diversity and looking at our recruitment efforts. We've really seen that there's an untapped market, and so we are really focusing on women in leadership. We formed a group, Women of Stream, and what we have done is survey throughout our company nationally and listened to our females and talk to them about what are their needs, from flexible work schedules to maternity benefits to equipping them for future leadership, setting a growth trend. So that is a focus that we really see in building our female leaders in the workplace. And also we've looked at not only the diversity recruitment, but we've opened up platforms to change mindset, kind of what you said of these are not inexperienced individuals. And so listening to them and hearing from them of what is important to them, of what do they want to see in this emerging workforce, we've really taken great strides in doing the active listening and giving them clear communication so we can set roadmaps for them so they can define future success.
I think the one thing that I find very interesting, particularly in public sector, is there's a bit of a changing of the guard happening, right? Where you've seen historically, or employees of public sector organizations, they stay for a long time because you've got such a great culture and great resources and great benefits and relatively great pay. I would say that that's happening more and more. How have you seen that impacted the work that you do, whether it's Carrie, Nina, or Jason? Are you seeing that happen in your organizations?
I'll go first, absolutely. We put forth an early retirement plan last year in October, and 10% of our workforce walked out the door. We tried to do knowledge transfer. It's very difficult with that level of employee, and it's just quick and dirty, right? And so that is one focus that we need to. We're little baby steps, but we really need to put AI focus into that, and what kind of data can we gather to glean the information out of these long tenured employees. 45% of our employees are millennials, but we do have that long tenured population because of a pension plan, which we no longer have except for our public safety group. And then you get into how do you retain those who don't have the pension because they know somebody sitting next to them may have the pension and they talk. And so that's another challenge that we have is exactly what you said, Allie, is dealing with almost 2 generations. I know there's 5, but it's really 2. So
what I would say is absolutely, we have the same challenge. We understand that, and actually with the pandemic, during the pandemic, many people retire. Many people, they just realize it's maybe too risky to continue to work, or maybe they starting a different set of activities and a lifestyle that they wanted to continue to have, that, and the pandemic gave them an opportunity and a space for that. So what we found is that we cannot take for granted that people will come in and stay for a very long time, or that the pension is going to be the incentive that will keep employees at work. So we need to put a package that is diverse, as that reflects the diversity of the people that we are seeking to attract. I spoke earlier about providing opportunities for growth. So is career development what is going to attract and retain someone, and making benefits attractive to everyone, not just to people that want to, and still there's people that want to come into the city, work all the career and retire. But it's fewer and fewer people that have that mindset. So we need to pivot and understand that our benefits need to reflect that new reality.
Older workers stay where they are because they know they're going to have a hard time getting another job. And that is really a sad scenario in our country, that you hit 55 or so, and I mean, it's tough. And I know because I have companies that call me and they tell me what they need, and you can tell that they might not right out say it, but from their wording that they don't want anybody who's older. And that is an untapped resource that a lot of companies could use if they would just open their minds to the fact that older workers have so much, not only expertise, but they have the right attitudes and personality to get along with everybody. And so I think that companies are missing out if they don't look to that older worker population.
Absolutely. If I may tap into it or kind of follow up on your comment, we're thinking about making it easy for our retirees to come back and work with us part-time, because many of them will love to do that, and we need them. We need their knowledge base. We actually could benefit so much from that resource, and sometimes because of how the benefits are structured, because of certain policies, that may make it difficult for them to do that. So we are working right now on a project to make that a reality in a couple of months. So I'm extremely excited and totally agree with you. It is an untapped resource, but we need to we need to listen to what they need and develop the program around their need so it works.
What I will add to what you're saying is the mentor program, because that was what our millennial culture was asking for. They wanted the wisdom of our older, more tenured workforce. And so that came through us listening, but it's what they wanted. And so you bring these two generations together and you collaborate, and that even helps with some of the knowledge transfer, because we deal with that as well. That's a struggle to retain that company knowledge. And so, but our employees wanted it. And so it was a wonderful thing to build a program where two generations were coming together and collaborating and seeing the fruits of what came from that.
Nina, I would just add, you were talking about retirees. We're looking at that dynamic as well. We're also looking at employees who left the organization regardless of where they left in their career. And we're studying very closely the this great recession, and as people leave, and the grass wasn't always greener on the other side. So we're starting to put in programs in place to do outreach, and we've actually seen the percentage of our boomerangs coming back into the organization increase dramatically over the past few months, because people get into a new situation and they realize, wow, there were things that I really missed at my old company. So we're developing a more formal way using data and other things to reach out to them to stay in touch and replenish our workforce.
I love the idea of we spend so much time on onboarding, right? So we're all about we've got to get the right onboarding, but I believe we need to do just as good as offboarding, because there are so many boomerangs that are happening. So how do we make sure they have a great offboarding experience, even though we might not want them to go? How do we make sure they feel like they could come back to us if they decided that maybe the grass isn't always greener, right? So this has been a great conversation. I want to give each of you the opportunity to share one nugget that you have been dying to share, and I just haven't let you shared it yet, all right? So what's one nugget that you want to make sure the audience hears from you that you believe will make an impact for the future-ready workforce, and how they as an organization can think through this future-ready mindset if they haven't already? So, Carrie. We became fast friends early.
I know, right? I'm going to be really basic, and it's don't stick your head in the sand. Really, you've got to keep your eyes above the waterline and truly watch what's happening. Like we talked about at the very beginning, and Den said this, the future is tomorrow, the future is next week. It's not just what are we going to do in 2 years. We really have to be on our toes and come out of the desert and work with our employees and what their needs are, as well as our future employees.
Troy, how about you?
Yeah, I think we have to embrace opportunities, and I think we can't turn a blind eye. We can't stick our heads in the sand any longer. The future to me is now. We've evolved so much in the last 2 years, and so I think we need to remember that the human dynamic of what we're dealing with, people are messy. Conflicts are messy. The situations we're dealing with can be messy, but these are our people's lives. This is our families. These are the fruits of what we have invested in them. So we have to embrace this changing workforce dynamic and understand that it's going to sometimes be difficult, but accepting it, embracing it can lead to some great growth and momentum, and really take our culture in a whole new direction, which can be very exciting. So saying yes instead of saying no.
So
Valerie.
Change means to take risks. And I believe that risks should be encouraged not only at the top, but also throughout the organization. And taking risks comes with the fear of failure. So you have to take risks, and you have to be prepared to fail and then move on.
Jim, how about you?
So my advice to leaders and organizations would be, Troy mentioned it earlier as far as listening. A few of you mentioned listening, but really, as organizations, it's essential to listen. To create a listening strategy, reach out, really be in tune. Valerie, you mentioned talking and learning from employees, frontline employees. In this dynamic environment, I think it's just critical to really understand and have the pulse of what is top of mind for our employees. And I would encourage employees to then be very open about sharing. It's everybody is an employee at some level, and so taking it, the reins of your own career, but also means sharing open and honest feedback with your leadership as well, would be my suggestion.
Awesome, thanks. Nina, how about you?
Yes, definitely agree with everyone in the panel so far. And in addition to listening, which is, also we need to get that honest feedback. The future of work is not just for employers, it's also for employees. So as an employee, what this future means for me, what are the opportunities that I have within this future? Don't get your head stuck in the sand about what that future means for you as an employee. Make sure that you are prepared to take on those opportunities that are going to be available to you. And part of it is being involved and being proactive, and not only in sharing your voice and sharing your thoughts and ideas which will shape what your employer does, because we are listening, but also will shape your own future.
I think just to think about over the last 2 years during the pandemic, we became problem solvers. We figured out ways to get things done, whether the resources that we had in hand or new resources in technology or whatever. We can't lose that mental alignment as we come out of the pandemic, or hopefully fully out of the pandemic. And so what I say is adaptability, being able to evolve, face new changes, use technology, or use our resources that we have to better serve. And so when we look at it as from a city perspective, those challenges, those things are there, but let's not lose that mental alignment that we're problem solvers, that we can get things done. And as we have new folks come in, new generations, we want to put that culture into them immediately, that we're problem solvers, we can find solutions. So I just want to make sure that we continue that process as we go.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. It's been a joy to be here with you today. At Ethos, we believe that we can have an impact on all the things that we do for not only the communities that we live in, our employees' families. We really are focused on rehumanizing the workforce. And we believe that by rehumanizing the workforce and getting back to our roots where we started, you can make a really big impact and attract and retain some amazing talent that, maybe never thought that they would be interested in working at the city of Dallas or at the DFW airport. So I love the idea of all the great resources that you shared with us today. I believe we are going to open it up to Q&A, and Cheryl is going to join us for that. Thank you.
To our studio audience, wasn't this amazing? We're going to bring you all some water. You all did a great job. Thank you so much. So now we are open to questions from our studio audience. We do have some questions that we received from some of our employees, and we will certainly make sure that we get to those questions as well. So studio audience, you were here. You've seen it live. What are your questions? Great question. Who wants to take that one? Again, thinking about balance. Valerie said we need artificial intelligence for that question. Who wants to tackle that one first?
I will.
Thank you, Nina.
It is very difficult to put it plainly, because again, there is not one size fits all anymore. And we cannot be, 13,000 different benefit plans. So what we do is we look at some of the data. Actually, our partners, Holmes Murphy, Blue Cross Blue Shield, they produce an immense amount of data that tells us where the needs are. And then we combine that with what our employees tells us, what they say they need. And then we try to develop programs that benefit the most employees. Or, it's almost like a marketing campaign. We look at certain groups of employees with certain profiles and then look at what benefits will actually be suitable for those employees. So almost like we have to become a marketing group that identifies what are the needs of the customer and delivers on that.
Nina, I would just add on, I think to your question, we did a conjoint analysis a couple of years ago, and what was surprising to us where we were just having a conversation about millennials and do they care about retirement and those type of things. We were actually surprised by how much our employees in that millennial group valued our retirement benefits. And when you look at external data, 72% of millennials, a recent study I just looked at, have no faith or they're very pessimistic about their having a retirement package provided to them upon retirement. So I think doing the analysis, but then I think looking at macro programs like a health and welfare benefit or a retirement benefit that might be harder to change or customize, but then starting to segment that using data to understand where can we flex a little bit more, perhaps on things like office flexibility and things like that, PTO, for example. So.
And I will also just add to is that we really defined our culture and what was, who we were, how we were going to operate, and we established very early on is we were going to stay true to our culture and our corporate fundamentals and build our policies around that, because you can't have, if you have 2,000 employees or 13,000 employees, you can't create precedent for every single situation. So we knew in staying true to our integrity of who we are, that would be our platform that we built from. So we built policies that align with our culture. We did look at the data. We did employee engagement surveys to find out what were the important things. So we knew if we were building a platform, building a program, we knew it was important to our people, but we also knew that everything we do, we tie it right back to our culture and our company values.
Thank you so much for your responses. Any other questions from our studio audience?
So one question would be regarding the workplace and social change. So examples would be companies that chose not to do business with Russia anymore because they invaded Ukraine. So that is kind of a global, but also in local, regional. How do you see that evolving over the next few years as employers, whether they be public or private employers, look to things, whether it is DEI programs, ESG programs, other things to try to positively impact society and the role of the corporation in that?
I can speak to a little bit of that, maybe not the specifically to Russia, but in late 2019 we started a mayor's ad hoc inclusion committee, and really speaking, that was to become, in his words, a megaphone for all the different cultures. I mean, Frisco is very multicultural community, and to be a megaphone for all those different cultures. And over the course of that 2020 with George Floyd and some other things, we had a high level of engagement with the community in regards to having those conversations. We wanted to have those conversations. We're a little bit smaller community of 225,000, so we were able to have those communities at a meaningful level. And so we wanted to continue to do that, not just move from just acknowledging that new people are here, or different people are here, but also that you're welcome in the community, that you have a role in the community, and ultimately get to the point where we're all, in the same process, moving in the same direction. We want to continue that and also spread that through the organization internally as well, not just externally. So we consider it to be a big piece of our new organizational culture, if you will. So
I love the way you described Fresco, a wealthy cultural. That was Other questions from would anyone else like to respond to that question? I want to take one question also from our employees. And one of the questions they asked was thinking about working remotely and the fact that we are virtual. Texas is often very restrictive in terms of those who may require H-1B1 as well as those that may want to work contract 1099. So Texas has some restrictions, and then sometimes the employers have restrictions about individuals working with those particular needs or having that type of criteria. So anyone want to respond to that question?
We use H-1B visa people. And we don't use them directly. We use them through companies whose job is to hold their visas. It doesn't make any sense for a lot of companies to do that themselves because it's very expensive, and and there's all kinds of rules regarding how you're to take care of them. And so most of the time companies that do utilize H-1B visas, and most of them are technology companies that use very high level tech talent. It just doesn't make any sense. And the H-1 visa situation is really pretty good at the very high levels of tech knowledge. It's not so great for lower levels to use that platform.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on that question? Okay, studio audience, any questions for you? Okay, I'll take this one and then I'll come to the back.
Hi, yes. My question is around student loans. So that's a huge barrier for Gen Z and younger millennial as they're starting families. And so retirement, I completely understand why it's unattainable. So I'm curious if anyone on the panel, what innovative and futuristic things are you doing to help mitigate the cost in paying off a student loan?
That's a great question.
Program and our retirement benefits to help individuals. You know, I think there's a workforce generation that feels that I'm never going to be able to retire because of the amount of debt that I have at whatever stage of life. So we've really helped to develop a retirement strategy that, you know, focuses on contributing, matching, but then also creating financial wellness programs, financial education, finding resources for these individuals of maybe there's financial counselors, debt resources that can help them with navigating that student loan debt that is so overpowering, because we've just seen that they're bringing it into the workplace because they're so mired down by their financial debt. We're losing individuals because of the almighty dollar. They're going to find new employers because they're trying to pay their debt. And so we've had to look at even our compensation strategies to help individuals with that. But we've really seen just the financial wellness programs, the counseling programs that we have available. We've developed online resources that we've partnered with our 401k provider that is helping individuals, give tools that can maybe help them get out of debt and providing those resources. And then we have happy employees who are more committed because we're investing in them.
Question? Well, for those of you that are joining online, in the bottom of your screen, you are able to see the QR code where you can actually see the bios for all of our panelists, as well as beautiful photos of the panelists. If you all will first just give them a round of applause, because these were some tough questions. Looking into the future is really, really hard work. On behalf of our co-host, Holmes Murphy, as well as the Dallas Regional Chamber, the City of Dallas wants to thank everyone for taking time to come out and to join us this morning. We are really excited about the future of work. We are Dallas. We are reimagining work, and we really appreciate everyone for coming out. We also want to thank all of our employees who are joining us online. This forum was created with you in mind. We wanted you to know that we are thinking about the future. We are thinking about our leaders. We are trying to make sure that you have all the skills and resources necessary so that we can not only be successful now, but also in the future. thanks to each of you, and thank you for spending your morning with the City of Dallas. Enjoy the rest of your day.